Welcome back to another video showing the benefits of scripting in PGMMV. And today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to take an existing project and we're going to find some logic that we can actually consolidate and do the same amount of logic with using one action instead of a few or several, depending on your case. And so with that said, let's get started. All right, so this is the sci-fi DLC for Pixel Game Maker, and this is particularly the boss object. So we can see that the boss has waiting, it's got its shoot loop here, and then it's got a little defense right here, this slide left and right. This is what we're going to be focusing on today. If I playtest real quick, I'll just describe a little bit about what it's doing. So when you go to fight the boss, it goes in its little rotation where it's shooting out. But if you get up here, it slides to you. And it will slide at you. And I just died there. But it will slide at you based off the direction that you're going. So right there, it slid that way. And then right there, it slid that way. And so if we look at the action side, it's actually a fairly easy setup within the actions. But for video purposes, this is a great way to show it. And then you could definitely see how you could take bigger logic islands like this and make them even smaller as well. So it goes to the right here when you discover an object. So it has a very big FOV basically. So if you go to here and apply color, we can see the FOV. It's just going to be a very long FOV. So if the player is anywhere in that area, that's when it's going to trigger to go to the slide. And right now it goes to the slide. It stops the movement right here. It changes the motion, and then it checks for what it needs to do next. So for instance, the first check is it compares its X coordinate to the player's X coordinate. And if it is greater, if this boss object's X is greater than the player's X, well, then that means that it is to the right of the player and it needs to slide left. And then you can guess that if it is less than or equal to, and I like to put, yet one of these has to be less than or equal to, I feel anyway, just to be more accurate. And so if it is less than or equal to, then it's going to slide right. And then you can see that the only difference is that it sets move direction 90, and then this one sets move direction 270. And then it does the audio playback here, you know, and then it has these checks. And these checks are exactly the same on both sides. So you could see that by consolidating this, say that we just could get it in this one island right here, this little action right here, then we could actually get rid of this, and we could get rid of about 4 links. So it would be slide. Actually, yeah, we could get rid of more than that. It would be slide to this and this, basically. Those would be our options. Or this, I guess, player hit. But anyway, we're just kind of focused on this area right here. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I have a Microsoft Code or Visual Studio Code here. I'll bring it in here. If you haven't noticed lately, I added a few more functions. I think I added this convert seconds to 300, and we can probably make use of this in this video. We'll see. And then I also added an input related function. So this is a is key press, or if you do an exclamation point when you're checking for it, it will be a not key pressed. It's not on press or on release, but it is the pressed and the not and the releasing form of that. So anyway, the first thing we need is I'm going to start a new script here. I'm going to go back to my power template and copy and paste it in there. So let's get that ready. There we go. And then the next thing that we'll need is the scripting made easy guide. And this is just so we can grab some runtime actions that we'll need here later on. All right, so we can actually refer to our visual script. And this is one nice thing about Pixel Game Maker is we can set it up visually and then we can convert it to script to get better performance or to narrow down the scope of our action nodes here. All right, so the first thing that we see that it does is the slide stops with the template move setting. And we can actually leave this here. We can actually let this do its job. That will be perfectly fine. But the next thing that we need to do is know whether it needs to slide left or right. And since both actually do the audio playback, we can actually copy the audio playback and run it in this to soon be slide only action. And then all we got to do now is set the move direction. And we did it based off the X coordinate. So let's get those first. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get access to the player. So we're just going to say var player equals, and we're going to use the function get other instance and then put in some quotes there. I don't know why that's not working. There we go. I was hitting the wrong button. All right, so we got our quotes. And now what is important about this is it needs the name or the ID of the instance. All right, so there's a couple ways that we can do this. So I'm going to go to the scene here, and I can see that the name of the player in this scene is player character. So I could just copy it as is and do that. Or if I start the scene here and I press pause right away so nothing happens, we can go to the debug object data and we can scroll down, or actually let's just type in player and go to normal scene. And here's our player character, and we can see that it's a scene instance ID of 5. All right, so we know that this one is 5. So in the script here, and I'm just being thorough, you probably already know this, but just in case, I can either use player character or I can use 5, just like that. Now, in this case, I would not recommend using the ID. The reason why is because it might be the player's ID might be different from scene to scene. So the only thing that will be consistent actually for the player, because you should only have one player, right, is its name. So the player character is actually what makes sense to use when getting specifically like the player or something like that. So that's what we'll do. The next thing that we're going to want is we're going to want the player's X, because that's what we compare it with. And you could be specific. You could say X chord. I think player X is just fine. We're going to use another power template function called get instance variable. And it's going to take an instance and a name or an ID. So the instance is going to be of the player, which we just grabbed up here. And then the ID is going to be the X, which I know to be 9. The other thing that you could do is you could say, I believe it's called the X coordinate position. I think that's the name. If you do need the name, there are links to this awesome thing right here, which is a standard enemies variable switch reference. If you go down here, you will find the X coordinate position. So that's the name. So you could just copy paste that to make sure you got it correct. Or you can see that its ID number is 9. Now we don't use anything on the right side. There is ways you can call using this method, but my functions do not use those methods. They only use either the name or the ID. All right, so we can go back to our script. So now we got the player, we got the player's X. Let's semicolon that. And I'm actually going to use 9. If you can use the number, it is better. I am going to say that this is the X chord. So the next thing that we're going to get is the self. And we could have done this first, either way. And that is simply the function get self. It's going to be that simple. And then we're going to get the self X, which is the same get instance variable. See, once you start doing this, you can start to scroll through a list of the functions that are popping up. And we want it to be of the self, and we want it to be 9 as well. And so now we got the X chord for the player, and we've got the X chord for the self. All right, so now we can start making an outline of what we want to do with these variables. The first thing we want to do is determine which side the player is on. Then we want to move toward the player, and that's really it. We just need to determine which side it's on and then move toward the player. So let's start on this first, and we're just going to basically take these links right here and make them into a script form. So we're going to say if the self X is greater than the player X, and if so, then we're going to do something. We'll come back here in a minute. And then, or else, if the self X is less than or equal to the player X, then we're going to do something else. And so the reason I said the less than or equal to is I think I said the less than or equal to is important, but it's actually the equal to in one of these is important. You need the equal to either in here or equal to right here. just so that you know that everything is covered. Because otherwise, if you have a less than and a greater than only, then you're missing one pixel basically, because what happens if they're at the same location? So might not need that in this particular case, but we'll just go with that. All right, so the one thing that I do need now that I'm looking at this, is I need a variable that is for the script only. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a script only var, and it's going to be the var, and it's going to be called the direction to move toward. And that's a pretty big long name, but it'll work for clarity. And I'm not going to set it to anything. I'm just going to declare that the variable exists. Then I'm going to come down here and say that these are editor vars. And this way I know that, okay, here's my script only vars, here's my editor vars, and I've kind of separated them according to what they are getting. And then here is the first check. So determine which side the player is on. So if the self x is greater than the player x, then we know that the direction to move towards is going to equal 270. That or left in this case. And then here we go. If it's less than, then we know that it needs to go right. It needs to go 90. And that's all this is. This basically, these two checks are done. And now we need to go into this, what happens in this action. So for instance, the first thing that happens is we did change the horizontal speed to 500. So I actually need to make sure that the speed for the slide is 500 as well. And then the next thing that we do is we do the set move direction and move. And so we've got these variables right here. So we need to go, or the settings. So now we'll go to our guide, and I'm going to just hit Control F and type in set move, and there it is right here. So I'm going to click on this, and here we go. So I need the guts of it, and so I'm not going to get the wrapper for it, because the power template comes with a wrapper. The wrapper is the IFE. If you're not familiar, just that part and that part, that's what we wrap the scripts in. So I'm going to grab these, and I'm going to head to the script, and we're going to say the move towards player. So here I'm going to put in the vars, and everything's set up nicely, so I don't need to change anything. Sometimes if these are like that, then you might have to select them all and hit tab, and it will move everything in or something like that. And we're going to use this direction to move towards now, and we're going to replace the direction, which is this portion in the editor. We're going to replace this setting with a variable now. And we're going to say it's going to be the value of the direction to move towards, which you can see that we declared it up here. We set it to 270 if the x is greater than the player x, and we set it to 90 if the x is less than or equal to the player x. All right, so now we're putting that value in right there. Now we kind of want to know what these other values are. And so there's a couple ways that you can do it. First is you can look at this property right here. You can go to the guide, and you can say direction is wanting this. Well, we already set the direction. We don't need that. And then the direction ID is the value is -1 or +1. And -1 will match movement, and +1 will be any direction particular. So let's see what I did in this script here. And you can see that I did match movement. So the base setting is for match movement, because it says that -1 is match movement, and my script is showing, or sorry, I guess my script is showing -2. So, but we do know that we want it -1. And then the move distance is set to 0. And let's see how much move distance I put in here. Oh, I put 0. I guess what we need to see is that the move distance enabled is false. So that means that it's going to go indefinite. And so I know I've showed how to do the show log in other videos. I just wanted to also show in this one how to read the property list here in case you're ever wondering. So see the move distance enabled, false equals infinite movement. So as long as we have false, it doesn't matter what value this is. Matter of fact, we could even erase this and just have these. I'm pretty sure you can even erase this as well, because if you don't add something, it will go off the base default value. So we could probably remove this as well. However, I like to keep things that are pertinent to the arguments, so I'm going to keep that there. The next thing I'm going to do is sometimes I don't like to use args per se. I like to be specific, so this will be the slide towards args. Or actually, sorry, not what it's doing, but what command we're calling. So this is the set move direction and move args. All right. And I'm definitely not always that. I just want to show that this is what this is, what it's meaning. And so then all I got to do is that if you do rename it, you just got to make sure that you replace it with the args down there. And then lastly, we don't need to call the AGTX object instance because we already do that when we get the self. So what we're going to do is we're just going to grab self. So I copy pasted that and I'm just going to paste it. So now self is going to execute that command and move based on that direction. So we can actually start testing this right now. We can copy this. Let's go to our action right here and we're going to open up a script and paste it into there. Now, the only thing is that since it is running a move runtime action, and because we're also doing a template move setting stop, we actually need to provide a brief wait in between those two so that it can stop the movement and then apply a new one, or else it will not work. So we're gonna wait, and I'm just gonna, I'll try 0.01, the lowest we can give it. Hopefully that's enough, but we'll see what we need as we go. So the only other thing that I need to do is I can actually get rid of this, and I just need to move one of these link sets up here, and I'm gonna do that with this one. So we just go like this, and we can go like this, and now I can get rid of the right. So now we go wait and shoot, and you can imagine we could do this in a runtime action in a single action as well now. But now from here we go to slide, and then we have a sidewalk here, which I could position out here, I guess now, like this. And then we got this one, which I could just bring in here. You can just see how this can clean up your visual perspective of your visual code as well. So yeah, so now we got a slide. We can player's dead if it gets hit, or dead add, I guess. And we got all this other stuff. So now let's test this and just make sure that it still works. So we're going to go up here. It's going to get in there. And when we get in range, let me get up. It should slide that way. Good job. And it should slide that way. Perfect. So we can see that we consolidated that just using a simple script. All right, so real quick, I want to just make sure that I was correct about that wait. I might have been wrong. Move template setting and then execute the new move type. Sometimes you get so much info, it's hard to remember. Okay, so yeah, you don't need to add that wait. However, it is good to know that if you are having problems transferring your moves, to just add a second wait. And that can go for a lot of things too. So it's still a good tip to know. And one thing to consider is that this was based off a 2-direction thing. Imagine if you had to check for 4 directions, up, down, left, right. Well, now you've solved that into one action instead of basically 4 different nodes, which I'm sure would all need links to their exits, their exit actions. And so you'd have to have, like, you'd be juggling these action nodes around when you could just simply do the check in the code with this line and then have the outcome be based on what that small little check was and still run the runtime action. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, comments, drop them in the comments below, Steam forums. And with that said, we'll see you at the next video.